You call me your Royal Highness one more time, I'm going to come through this Zoom call and smack you.
How about that for Smack Talk? Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Brandstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 139. I don't know why I said it like that, but today's guest is Jason DeFillippo. Jason is an award-winning podcast producer, podcast host, podcast editor. Basically, he's just a madman and a legend in the podcasting space. He is the co-host of Grumpy Old Geeks. He has edited and produced hundreds and hundreds of episodes for the Harbinger Show, the Tim Ferriss Show, Kevin Rose. I'm talking about some of the top most popular podcasts ever. You can do the math. His work has been heard by lots and lots of people. In this episode, we talked podcast production tips, podcasting and hosting tips from the best of the best of the best, and one of Jason's most famous edits, which I don't even want to think about how long it took. It is Jason D. etc. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Jason DeFillippo, the award-winning podcast producer and grumpy old geek himself. Jason, thank you for joining. This is really cool. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Yourself?
I'm doing fantastic as well. This is really cool. It's kind of like a little podcast producer to produce. You know, we have basically the same resume, shows we've worked on, but really excited to learn about your podcast production and podcasting journey, as well as talk about a range of other things. Before we get into that, or I guess this would be in the range of other things category, you state that you retired from technology in 2015.
Programming, yes, absolutely. I have not written a line of code since then. I used to write lots and lots and lots of PHP and SQL and things like that. I was a full stack LAMP guy. And as soon as I could stop doing that for a living, I did it immediately. So yes.
What made you be so excited after all those years to be like, all right, I am done with that?
Well, I mean, 20 plus years of writing code. And at that point, I was over 40. It was one of those things where it's like, you can't get a job as a LAMP stack programmer over 40 because like the big people that hired were, Facebook. They're one of the biggest LAMP stack houses in the world, and nobody wanted you. I just moved to LA from living in the Bay Area for quite some time on my third tour of duty, I believe, my third startup tour of duty. I was back in LA and just doing web work, because back then WordPress was, the shiny thing that everybody wanted. So I was working in WordPress, which was torturous. One of the worst things that any programmer who used to write his own software could ever do. And when the opportunity came along to work with Harbinger and basically be his producer, I jumped at it. I'm like, hell yeah. Where do I sign?
What is a LAMP stack? I don't even know if I could say it right. LAMP stack, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, yeah, it's just web technology. So it's Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So Linux is the operating system. Apache was the web server. MySQL is the database layer, and PHP is the programming layer that ties it all together.
Got it. Now, can you repeat that 4 times fast in Spanish, please?
Yes. No bueno.
I thought you were going to say C, but it's interesting that you kind of retired and are like, screw that shit. I'm done with that. I've done that enough. But then in Grumpy Old Geeks, there's a lot of stuff kind of in the overall space that you and your co-hosts talk about. What is it like kind of now these days? And, having several 500 episodes of doing this, what does it mean to you to kind of be able to not do this stuff every day, but be able to talk about whatever the hell you want?
Oh, it's way more fun. It's way more fun because, when we're in the business, we couldn't really talk about a lot of it. We'd have to go to the bar and get drunk and kvetch to our friends. Now we just do that to 10,000 people every week. So it's just way more fun and get paid for it. But we don't write code anymore. Brian's retired. I've retired just from the code side because writing code is a young man's game. And I mean, I used to wake up in the morning, go to work. I'd pick up a 12-pack of Diet Mountain Dew, sit it next to my desk, warm, of course, because in my mind, if it's warm, it's going to get into my bloodstream faster. And I would code for 18 hours a day and go home, lather, rinse, repeat. And I did that for 2 decades. Yeah, it was just nice to not do that anymore and get into something more that's artistic.
It's definitely more artistic. Now, do you still drink warm Mountain Dew?
Oh God, no, I can't touch soda. Period. No, Mountain Dew is the devil. Diet Mountain Dew is twice the devil. I think the diet just keeps you fat. That's all that does.
Let's get into podcast production. So you dropped the programming world, you picked up the production world. Love at first sight, love at first edit, we'll call it. Besides Harbinger being like, dude, come be a part of this, what got you interested in the production side of podcasting?
Well, it started off, I didn't do much technical production for Jordan at the beginning. We had a great editor who he's got back again now, Jason Sanderson, who's a fantastic audio engineer and editor. For the beginning of the run of the show, it was mainly Jason doing the editing, the other Jason. I would do the recording. I was basically on the recording side. So I would produce the shows. I built this massive Skype setup in my house. One of the things about podcasting, coming from a nerd who loves gadgets, I have a chronic case of gear acquisition syndrome. If you came to my studio, you would just be floored by how much crap that I have here. And it used to be technology. I'd always have to get the new iPhone, have to run the betas, needed a new computer, all this stuff. When I left tech, there was no reason for me to buy that stuff anymore. But when I moved into audio, I'm like, whew, a whole new world of crap that I can't afford just opened up to me. Playing with new gadgets was really one of the best things when I started to become a producer. Learning what mixing boards were, learning, all of the technicals behind audio, because I'd never been an audio guy, ever in my life. So it was like jumping off the deep end. I love podcasts, but how to make one, I had no clue. So it was a really fun trip to learn a completely new skill set, get paid to do it, and build a new career out of it. Pivoting off a 20-plus year tech career at my age, like early 40s at that point, was scary, but it was fun. It was a ton of fun.
And here we are years later, you still have no idea how to produce a podcast. So.
Oh, none whatsoever. No, I'm terrible at it.
Exactly. I don't even know why we're talking. If you look back to kind of when you first picked things up, what's something you wish you knew about producing podcasts you wish you knew back then?
Buy the best you can afford then. Don't skimp, because you end up buying the cheap stuff and you always upgrade. And if I would have just bought the best stuff when I started, then I would have saved so much more money. Podcast production was just such a Wild West thing back then. Putting the pieces together was a very interesting thing that we take for granted nowadays. We're talking on Zoom, but we're doing double enders and things like that. But in the old days, that's all you could do to make a professional show, was do a double ender. And you had to figure out, what the hell's a double ender? What's a mix minus? What is all this crap? I ended up trying to figure out, okay, so the holy grail back then was to have everybody on their own track, but everybody was remote. Okay, so how do we do that? I went out and bought a bunch of Mac Minis, bought some rack mounts for them, had everybody call into different machines, had a 16-channel mixer that I would mix everybody in and back out, cables everywhere, and we would do it over Skype, and it was great. Until, then things like Zencastr came along and ruined all of that. So now I've got racks of Mac Minis lying around I can't do anything with because they're useless. But, I love watching the technology grow over time. It's just been, it's a fun thing.
It definitely is. I'm cracking up because, in listening to Grumpy Old Geeks, like I know from your personality and what you discuss that there's certain things that if you don't like it, it's just kind of like screw them. They totally ruined this. They ruined this. I know there's certain platforms in podcasting that you're the same way about. So we're gonna see how many different providers we can bring up in this that are dead to you.
Well, we can always start with the Blue Yeti. I mean, that's the easiest one.
Exactly. It's like you could ask what gear to use, and you could ask Jason's top gear to don't even waste your breath on.
Yeah, my list of gear to not use is much, much, much longer than my list of gear to use.
But when you look back to those days, and I'm kind of like shuddering from thinking of so many cables and figuring all this stuff out, but when you think back, I mean, what lessons still ring true to this day that are really important to keep at heart? I don't even know how to say that. To take to heart when it comes to podcast producing?
Treat the guests like they're royalty. That's one thing for sure. I mean, that's just a lesson that when we first started doing the show, we would, court these guests and we were nobodies and we had to treat them, like the royalty they were to us because they were giving us their time. They're getting very little in return at that point. So you had to do everything that you possibly could to make them feel special, go the extra mile to make sure that, everything was solid on your end. If anything happened, it wasn't your fault. Never make it your fault. And if it's the guest's fault, it then becomes your fault. You always take the blame for anything that ever goes wrong. That was a thing because I'd never had to deal with booking and guest relations and things like that and guest follow-up. Learning how to talk to people. And also the other thing that I learned as a producer is you got to be really good at chit chat because when you come in and the guest's there and the host is like 10 minutes late, you got to be able to, improv, shuck and jive, ask about the kids, ask about the weather, hey, what's it like in Poughkeepsie today? Really be able to make them feel comfortable because you're the opening act at that point. When the host is stuck in a crapper and isn't going to show up for a bit because he ate too much Chipotle that day. True story many times on the Jordan Harbinger
This
show.
sounds like a very real example, yeah.
Jordan loved his Chipotle, but it was more like Chipotle, and he'd always have it half an hour before a show. Always smart. That kind of personality dynamic thing with dealing with guests is something that I don't think a lot of people get the hang of or even realize that is a thing when they first start out. It's like, oh, I got a guest, and they just don't know how to really handle that person. They're like, oh, you're a professional. You're coming on. You know what the drill is, and a lot of people don't know the drill, so you got to walk them through it and be cool.
Well, thank you, Your Royal Highness, for that royal answer. Treating the guests with royalty is one thing, but that's spot on. I've never thought about it, but if you are someone that's there kind of present, whether you're waiting on a certain host who's still in the bathroom or for whatever reason that you really are the start of the show, you're the opening act. What tips do you have for making the guest feel, I guess, ice broken? Like, so many people talk about icebreakers. What's your favorite way to do that when you're talking to a guest?
Oh, obviously immediately ask them how their day is. Is everything, cool and kosher? And do they have any questions about the show? That's the first thing that you should always ask is, do you have any questions about the show? How long is it? What are people going to ask? Because it's different for every guest. Some people are, they come in expecting to have a conversation. Some people expect to come in and it'd be like a press junket. You can kind of get your expectations from the guest's answers, and then you can back channel that to your host as well, which really helps make a better show. But yeah, to break the ice, it's just be cool. Talk about stuff. You know what? At this point, by the time the person comes in, you know what their interests are. You know what their history is because you've done your homework. A lot of production on my side when I first started was writing up the bios of the guests, figuring out what we're going to talk to them about, kind of knowing them before they even show up. You're going to know a lot more about that person than they're going to know about you. So leverage that. Use that to your advantage to break the ice and create a connection.
Pun intended with the being cool and talking about cool stuff with breaking the ice. That's one part of the puzzle or picture, the podcast production picture, just to be permanent
very
with alliteration.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can't resist. What is your personal favorite area of like the podcast production ballpark?
Oh God. I can tell you the ones I don't like.
I'm going to start framing every question from what's your least favorite?
I mean, you know who I am, man. You know that I basically focus on the negative first, and then we get to the positive.
I hate all of it.
Yeah, this is a shitty job, man. Why are you even talking about this? Quit. Go work at Starbucks.
How about this? When you switched from the programming side to the podcast production side, what's the one area that still to this day it's just like, oh man, I wish this could be easier?
Oh, editing for sure. I wish there was a magic button that you could just say done. You know what I like? Done. But I am such a stickler for my edits, and that's, how I make most of my money is editing for other people. So I can't get rid of that, unfortunately. But the other thing that's really tough is audio quality of the guest. No matter how much you coach them, how many sound checks you do, something always goes wrong on the day. They wear, the worst coat that rubs on their microphone, or they stand too far back, things like that. Just trying to train the guests on audio to make it sound decent is a challenge. That is definitely still a challenge to this day, which I cannot believe. After a year of being in lockdown, people still show up and say, "Can I use my AirPods?" No, you can't. Come on. So yeah, it's just guest education, I think, is very difficult sometimes when it comes to just getting the audio quality that you need to sound professional. They're like, "Hey man, I was on 3 podcasts and I use my Blue Yeti and I have it this way." I'm like, "Well, it's upside down and backwards and you got the wrong polar pattern selected there." So, yeah, thanks for that. Training people on that is still incredibly frustrating. Even though we send them, docs on how to do everything. Nobody reads anything. Okay, that can be broken down to guests don't read instructions. If you want to distill it down to, it's at atomic level.
Well, I appreciate your Royal Highness, reading instructions before this interview. But
you call me your Royal Highness one more time, I'm going to come through this Zoom call and smack you.
Hey, I can't let things go.
I'm a working man just like you.
But the editing aspect is huge, and I think a lot of times when people think of podcast production or podcast producers, they think of the editing piece, and obviously it is the most time consuming part. Why is it important to edit your podcast?
I've said this on multiple shows and nobody listens, so I'll say it again until somebody does.
What was that?
See, exactly. Steve Jobs. Have you heard my Steve Jobs quote before? Probably not.
I wasn't listening, but
yeah. So when Steve Jobs was working on the first Macintosh, he wanted to get the boot time a second shorter. He's like, over the lifespan of this computer, do you know how many human lifetimes we can save if we make this boot time a second shorter? Because people are going to be booting this thing multiple times a day, because he probably knew it was going to crash every 37 seconds. He wanted to optimize it to the point where it would save time. Now, when you're editing a show, there's a lot of cruft in a show. I'm sure you're going to edit me down to about 36 seconds, so perfect.
That's being generous.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. If you can cut out enough space to knock your show down a couple of minutes and you have 100,000 listeners, then that's a significant amount of time. And you do that over the lifetime of a show, you're saving people a lot of time. I appreciate that because I respect the guest. I mean, the listener. I respect the guest. Like I already told you, royalty. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I respect the listener and their time that they're giving to us for our show. So I want to make it as cool and great as possible for them to sit in their car, listen to it, get everything that they need, and then walk away saying, "Hey, that was great. Didn't take too long. There weren't too many ums and ahs," which they will never think of. But they come away feeling better because you edited a show and got rid of the crap that they didn't have to listen to.
Fantastic example. And it really puts
you can cut that part out.
Exactly.
You can.
Yeah, I do edit, by the way.
Okay.
That was like E-I-E-I-O. It really puts it in perspective when you think about 1 minute. Doesn't seem like that much of a podcast episode that you're taking out, but when you think about your listeners, it's 1 minute for all of those people that they didn't know happened in the first place. But if it was a really, really boring or just like not worth listening to moment that you included in, they're going to be thankful that that wasn't included. So yeah. I like that perspective there.
Also, it comes down to bandwidth as well for people who have tight bandwidth packages. If they're downloading shows to their phone, I'm not talking about the United States, but there are people that listen to podcasts in other countries, believe it or not, that have really crappy data packages. People in Canada on Rogers. I know many of you. You want to save them some bits and bytes because that translates into real money for some people.
Anything you can do to save anything. We're living in like a concise world where like everything concise is better. So I can totally get with that. What about editing speed? What's your take on editing speed and how long it takes to edit? Because everybody is like, if you're editing things yourself, you're always slapped in the face of, holy shit, this takes way longer than I ever anticipated, and I knew it was going to take long. Have you picked up any tricks over the years on ways to be more efficient editing?
Yeah, and I'll just tell you my secret formula as a professional production guy. I charge my clients 3x audio delivered because over time, that's what it averages out to. Because you're going to get a show where you can almost not even bother editing because it's a great guest, your host is on point that day, and you're going to come in at 1.2x. audio delivered. But sometimes you're going to come in at 10x audio delivered. So you have to kind of balance that out. And over the thousands of shows that I've edited, 3x is a pretty good baseline for what to charge people. Now, tips and tricks, when you're editing a show, I use Logic. I don't know what you use, but I use Logic, and there is a very simple speed enhancement. And once you have worked on a show for quite some time, you know the cadence of your guest, you know the cadence of your host after, maybe like 5 minutes of regular listening, and then you can bump the speed up. And you can go through and you can listen for triggers and you can listen for filler words and things like that. A lot of times too, one thing that always gets me, when a host asks a guest a question, almost the entire first sentence of what comes out of the guest's mouth can be deleted because they're stammering, they're putting their thoughts together. They get to the next thing, which is actually the meat of what the answer for the question should be. Listening to that, cutting that out, that knocks it down quite a bit. But as far as speed enhancements go for editing, yeah, actually make it faster. I can edit it 2x on a lot of my shows because I know the host, I know the guests. Just after a couple seconds of listening, you know if they're going to be a stutter machine or if they're going to do the smack, the old smack. You learn to hear these foibles in people's vocabulary and cadence, and you can figure that out by just looking at the waveforms down the line and figuring out, oh, yep, there we go, and cutting those before you even get to them almost.
All for fixing the foible. All for fixing the foible. See, I'm going to take out that first part. See, now you have me like thinking of stuff as I'm saying it. You really fuck with my head. No, all for that. Those damn foibles. And I think it is crazy. Like the more you get used to editing, you're almost seeing stuff in a different language, how you can identify and you can identify the, smack, things like that.
You can see the matrix. It really is. You're looking at the waveforms and you can see the matrix. You can see what they're going to say before they even say it.
Speaking of big name movies / podcasters, that was a terrible transition. We're just going to keep it in. We're rolling with it. You yourself have had tons of success in the podcasting world. And you've also, produced, edited, teamed up with some of the biggest names, most inspiring names out there. I mean, personally, like Tim Ferriss is like my idol. Jordan Harbinger, like we go way back. He was on this podcast back in episode 83. It was very cool. The guy's got stories on stories. Oh my God. Obviously,
I've heard them all a million times.
Yeah. Do you want me to introduce you guys? No.
Oh yeah.
But how did you start working with Tim Ferriss?
I knew Tim before his first book came out. I met him the day before his first book came out. We ran in the same circles in San Francisco. And I used to pimp his stuff on my blog. I used to own a blog network called Met Blogs, and we had over 50 blogs around the world with over 500 writers and things like that. So I would help him get his book out there because if you remember, when you go back and listen to any of his press that he did about the 4-hour work week, one of his big things was he went to bloggers first. He didn't go to regular press. He went to bloggers to do that, and I was one of the bloggers. But we also had a lot of mutual friends. I ended up just becoming friends with him before that. By the time he started podcasting, I'd been doing it for a while already. I would just send him tips and tricks. And then one day he just had one thing he couldn't figure out. He was trying to edit an Ableton or something. I said some snarky bullshit comment to him on Twitter.
You're probably like, why would you ever use Ableton or any of the 15 programs like this?
That was kind of it. That was kind of it. And he's like, I'm not looking for a snarky reply. I'm looking for a fix to my problem. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought this was a hypothetical. So I sent him a fix to his problem. And he came to town. We had lunch. God, that was a while ago because so when my puppy was new, like 5 or some years ago, and he had some stuff that he had to do. So I let him use my studio and we just kept talking and I took over as his editor. I fixed a bunch of his stuff and worked for, 150 episodes, I think, of that show before I had a falling out with his producer and had to walk away. But Tim's a great guy. I love his stuff. If you read Tools of Titans, I am the first person thanked in people who taught him how to podcast.
There you go. You're the Titan. the grumpy old Titan.
Yeah.
No, he's awesome, and it's so cool that I was looking up the episodes that you've edited for him, and like some of the like Richard Branson, Jamie Foxx, like some of those are some of his most iconic episodes. So that's amazing.
Richard Branson was my last episode that I did for him because when I saw that was coming down, I'm like, I can't quit yet. I got to do Richard fucking Branson. Come on, I got to get that one.
Exactly.
Yeah, Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx was an interesting one because that's one we won an award for from Product Hunt. They had podcast awards for some strange reason on Product Hunt, but the episode that I did with him for that got Best Podcast Episode of the Year on Product Hunt. So, hey, an award's an award. I'll take it. Goes on the CV. But I edited that episode on an Amtrak train from Los Angeles to Chicago using Sound Studio, which is a destructive editing program. And
it sucks.
If you saw how many markers, and it took me 9.5 hours to edit that show. And if I had to do it today, I could probably do it in like an hour and a half. And I'm sure it sounded terrible. I mean, I go back and I listen to the old stuff I did for him, and I'm just like, I can't believe you kept me on as long as you did. I sucked at it. But I sucked at it, but I was still better than his other editors, so at least I got the gig. That Jamie Foxx one I just remember because it was a great episode. It was a great interview because I love Jamie Foxx, and I thought Tim got some good stuff, like really good stuff out of him. But trying to do it on a train, on a laptop with, headphones. I don't know if you've ever tried to edit on a train. It's not easy with a trackpad. It's really hard to keep your laptop in one place.
I have not. Nice pun with trackpad, though.
Oh, yes.
No, I can't imagine just not being stationary, and that you're literally the opposite of that. That's great. Well, but those are iconic episodes. And when you look at Tim, when you look at Jordan, other people you've worked with that have, won awards on awards. I know you've got awards yourself, but it literally are known as, some of the top podcasters in the space. What is it about the way they work or the way they approach podcasting that helps them be so great?
Preparation. It's all about preparation. Especially with Jordan, we would work long and hard to have everything kind of laid out before the guest came in. We knew what we were going to talk about. We knew their backstory, and we had a side. So if we needed to go down a rabbit hole, we could. We didn't always do that, but there were times when something went one direction and we knew that we had something in the can that we could pull out and say, hey, what about this, or things like that. Tim is all about preparation. I never really produced any of his shows, so I wasn't on that side of it. I was just his editor and consigliere, I guess, for teaching him like gear and recording technique and things like that.
I was going to guess the word consigliere.
Oh, I'm sure you were. I'm Italian. What do you want? My name's DeFillippo. Come on. Yeah, but with Jordan, I mean, Jordan and I were a team, like a solid team for years and years and years, and I think even some more years. So we kind of did a lot of stuff together and just tried it. We threw whatever at the wall and it stuck or it didn't. We would bring in experts, and that's the one thing that I think both Tim and Jordan are good at too, is getting outside advice. It's like, okay, this is a professional outfit. We are making money doing this show. What can we do better? Where should we take the show? We would bring in radio experts who were absolutely useless, gave them lots of money, and then they're like, oh, but you gotta say the name of the podcast middle of the way through. I'm like, why? Do you know how a podcast works? You start at the beginning. You're not going to tune in the middle. But yeah, that's kind of some of the advice that they gave us. Yeah, and with Jordan, it really comes down to one of the most important business things I've learned from him is this is a business. How much does it cost to get a listener? How much is that listener going to earn you over time? And where can you find a place to put your money that will give you more listeners, that you can monetize on? It's really just a business. It's in and out, in and out. I don't really follow that with Grumpy Old Geeks because I don't have a budget. But if I did, I would follow Jordan's rules of success because he's way more successful than I am.
We don't need to get into accolades here, but what's an award? No, I'm just kidding. When you look at your own podcast, Grumpy Old Geeks, you've put out over 500 episodes, and there's like the famous podcasting stat of vast majority of podcasts don't get past episode 7, stuff like that. What has allowed you and your co-host and team to to get to milestones like this and just keep doing this and just keep putting stuff out?
It's fun. I mean, if the show's not fun, it's not worth doing no matter how much money you're going to make. And we knew when we started Grumpy Old Geeks, it's like, okay, if we don't, that was the running joke. If we don't make any money by our first 10 episodes, we're going to quit. And it took us till episode like over 100 to make more than $1. The thing that it came down to is it was fun. It was totally fun to do, and it's still fun to do. We still enjoy doing it. We hate each other some days, can't stand each other some days, but at the end of the day, we still respect each other. You have to, if you're going to have a co-host, you have to respect them no matter what. And you're going to have your fights and things like that. But if you're doing a podcast and you're miserable, then you shouldn't be doing that podcast. Find a new one or stop doing it.
Absolutely. I live by that. Like I love talking to people about it. They're like, how am I going to keep this going? Like, how am I going to make sure this is something I want to do? That fun piece is so, when you think about it, what's a topic that you wouldn't mind talking about, or actually that you'd really enjoy talking about for an hour every single week, or even more so than that? And it's amazing how many people start podcasts and then realize, I don't really want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It kind of helps to have that conversation early.
Well, a lot of people shouldn't be podcasters. Just because it's cool and hip doesn't mean you should do it. You know,
Right.
think about that for a second. Just because the cool kids have one doesn't mean you need one too. You can enjoy the medium and still, just because it's easy to make doesn't mean you have to do it. Like if you have your own TV show, you don't have your own YouTube channel probably, but a lot of people have podcasts because they think it's easier than having a YouTube channel or gasp a TV show like a professional. You know, sometimes just enjoy the art form and don't throw your hat in the ring. If it's not a calling for you, step back and let the rest of us do it and quit crufting up the damn charts. That's what I got to say.
You're going to set a record for Cruft references in this. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm old and crufty. What do you want?
If you want your own podcast with no cruft, or you're like me and don't really know to this day what cruft means, email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will help you save time with your high-quality podcast because it definitely can help your brand. It can help your business. If you do something fun, if you talk about something you enjoy talking about, podcasting can be an awesome thing for you. But it's not in your best interest to spend all the time it takes to remove the cruft and all those behind-the-scenes minute details. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. Now, back to Jason to switch gears and unwind and, decruft whatever else is involved. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to inspiration and creativity. So here, I would love to know, how do you unwind? Like, let's say, for example, you're spending 9.5 hours on a train editing a super, potentially award-winning episode. You need to decompress after that. What do you do in your spare time?
I drink a lot. I don't know if you've ever listened to Grumpy Old Geeks. I drink a lot.
That actually explains everything.
Yeah, I play with my dogs and I watch TV. That's it. I mean, I'm a very simple person. I never leave the house, but I enjoy it. I was purpose built for not leaving the house. So when I'm done with work, I go in. I love to cook. I'm a huge fan of the kitchen. And like I said, I sit outside, I play with my dogs and listen to silence, or my roommate and I just watch TV. I'm a very simple kind of guy. In the old days, I would take my camera out and go take photos because I was a photography guy. That's what I got my first degree in. That's kind of it. Like I said, I'm a simple guy. So when it comes to inspiration, I find my inspiration in books. I love to read.
What type of books do you read?
I read a lot of science fiction, surprisingly. I'm a sci-fi guy. Yeah, every now and again, I'll jump out of my lane and find something different. I like biographies. I'm a big fan of biographies. And I love magic, too. I've been getting into just reading about magicians, not magic itself, because I know how long that takes to perfect. I do not want to learn how to handle a deck of cards, but I love the mindset behind magicians. I love Darren Brown. I think Darren Brown's amazing. And what's that guy? He had that amazing special on Hulu. Did you see Derek Delgado? He had a special on Hulu that was just amazing. And you could see what true skill with cards looks like. So that kind of stuff really inspires me. I just love it. I love it.
What do you like so much about magic?
I just love how it fucks with your perception of everything. you know?
That
I
took a
really
dark
do.
twist, but I like it.
Oh, no, I do. I mean, that's really it. I mean, I've been a fan of Penn and Teller since I was probably like 10 years old. So
At the time of this recording, literally the day before, I just finished listening to Tim's episode from a while ago now with Penn, and I'm just blown away.
we did Penn Jillette on the Jordan Harbinger show long, long ago. It was really good. And that's when he used to live at the Slammer, his crazy house in Vegas. And he literally had a urinal in his office. And I'm like, that is the greatest thing in the history of the world. I wish I had a urinal in my office.
Yeah.
But I actually, no, I got to be a guest on an episode of Penn Sunday School. And as the heavy metal fan in me just was tickled pink, I was on episode 666. That was two atheists on the podcast of the devil. It was great.
What a match made in heaven. See what I did
Yeah.
there?
Uh-huh.
Speaking of match made in heaven, let's talk about some negative stuff. So
You're in the right place for that.
let's get to the fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Wild Business Shout Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a creative marketing campaign approach, just something disruptive. There's something with your buddy Chris Lockhead he did in terms of reviews, and like so many people stress out about getting more podcast reviews and how meaningful are they or not. And I think it was a really cool approach. You mind sharing that?
Chris and I he's one of my dearest friends who I've never met in person. And he's one of my clients too. So caveat emptor on that one. He did a brief campaign, a social media campaign with Cole Schaefer, who is an amazing copywriter. Check out honeycopy.com and sign up for his newsletters because he is a crazy good copywriter and he's a kid. He's like 27 or something. He did a series of images with Chris in black and white and so basically he made it look like that Instagram self-helpy bullshit everybody posts, but it was just the negative reviews, the 1-star reviews with a quote. It just had, the 1 star highlighted with the 5 stars and just a scathing comment. And it was hilarious because Chris loves to polarize. I mean, he's a polarizing character, so it makes more sense that he would do something like that. And I saw it and I was just like, that's just genius. It's just genius. I mean, if you know him and you're already following him on socials, you're obviously subscribed to what he's doing. But I mean, the joke there was it was phenomenal. I loved it so much.
That is great because so many people talk about, and I'm guilty of this as well. It's like if you are talking to people about reviews and you're kind of only talking about 5-star reviews, when you shed light on the 1 star and you shed light and kind of don't take yourself too seriously, or even you can repurpose in that way. It's a really, really clever approach that resonates with people. And I'm curious about this whole reviews thing and the CTA, asking people to subscribe. Has podcasting always been like that? Like what's changed in terms of like subscribe and review landscape over the years?
People are still asking for subscriptions and reviews, but you're not allowed to say subscribe anymore because Apple has changed their mind.
Right.
They
asking for follows.
Yes, they become the woked. So now you have to follow instead of subscribe, which it makes sense because there was a time when we had to explain to people subscribe meant you still got it for free. But because when people hear the word subscribe, it's like, oh, they want money. It is a good change, I think, for Apple to lead the pack on that. The fact that they were going to do it for 18 months and didn't tell anybody was kind of crappy, but I am fine with the change to follow. The thing is, it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's social proof. If you have a lot of reviews, that's fine. You can ask for them if you want. I don't recommend any. If you have 100 reviews, fine. Stop asking for it on the show. On Grumpy Old Geeks, we still ask for it because we like snarky reviews. We read every review that comes in, and we love 1-star reviews. That doesn't mean you should give us one. We prefer a 5-star funny review as opposed to a scathing 1-star review. But anytime anybody gives us a 1-star review, we will read it on the air and rebut it. We completely rebut it. Yeah, it's in use of the show, though. It is part of the show. So it's not just because we want reviews, because we don't care about reviews. We have over 6,000 reviews on iTunes. I couldn't care if we ever got another review because it doesn't move the algorithm at all. It's useless beyond social proof.
Right. It's like it's totally vanity. It does. I think it helps maybe from like a credibility or like word of mouth standpoint, depending on the person looking at it. But
that's what social proof means, by the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Just call me Merriam-Webster. let's get a little bit more unusual. Not that, this is a usual conversation, but pet peeves, quirks, and weird talents, some unusual stuff here. What is a weird talent you have? Like something that's maybe a party trick, or I guess in your case, a sitting around the house watching TV trick is you just have a knack for it. You're really good at it.
I can make a ring out of a $1 bill in under a minute.
Nice. Oh my God. I haven't seen that since I was a kid.
That was a bar trick. My second mom was a bartender, and she taught it to me. This was back in the 80s. She taught me how to make a bow tie as well, but that one didn't stick. My brother is an origami literal master. No chops against him, but I can still make a ring out of a dollar bill any day of the week.
Of course. Well, that I'm sure that comes up a lot. So that's good that you're equipped with that. How about pet peeves? What's your big? And I'm going to limit you to one, Jason. But what's your biggest pet peeve?
The Blue Yeti. I'm sorry, the Blue Yeti. It's terrible. The thing is, it's a fine microphone if you work in a treated room that is basically 700 feet underground, where no outside sound can get in.
Which, as a lot of people do.
Yeah, exactly. For new podcasters, it is just terrible. It is a terrible piece of kit because it's a condenser mic, which means it's very sensitive. It has different polar patterns on the back, so you have to know to pick the one that looks like a butt. And some people say a heart, but I prefer the heart-shaped ass. And so you have to have that one. A lot of people talking to the top of it, like they're talking into, like the mic that I'm talking into, or probably you're talking into, that's a top address mic. It's not a top address mic. It is a side address mic. That's where the hole is that the voice goes into. Nope, people don't know how to do that. And it's overpriced for what it is. I would recommend people get a better, cheaper mic. But yes, my biggest pet peeve is the giant Blue Yeti.
And we will have an affiliate link for the Blue Yeti in the show note. No,
of course you will. Well, you better.
I've seen that as well in episodes I've edited where I know they're using that. It's just so sensitive and like so much extra background noise. I know what you're saying. I wish I could have the same sort of passion and hatred that you're sharing, but that's a great one.
Yeah, you haven't edited as many shows as I have with people using the Blue Yeti, and you can mitigate it. You can mitigate it with a blanket, gain, and proximity. So if you have a blanket under you, that's going to get a lot of the reflection off the table or the monitor. Don't put your monitor directly in front of you. If you do have a monitor in front of you, put it at an angle so the reflection goes away from it. Turn the gain down and get up on top of it. That's the way to fix a Blue Yeti. But most people who have a Blue Yeti aren't going to go to that trouble.
And then what about quirks? What's something a little quirky about your personality that somebody calls you out for?
Oh, Jesus Christ, I don't know. I'm a vulgarian. That's about it. I'm quirky by default, I guess. I really don't know what would be quirky of me. Quirky is something that you say that somebody else is. You don't. If you're talking about yourself, I don't know how you would define something about yourself that's quirky, because that doesn't make it quirky. That just makes it you. So I don't know. I don't know how you would answer that.
All right. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Sure.
All right. There's that trademark enthusiasm. All right. Let's get wild.
Woo! Bring it on, motherfucker.
What is the episode that you've either, been on hand for as a production partner or done yourself that you wrapped up and was just like jaw dropped? Like that, I cannot believe that 60 minutes or whatever, like the things discussed in this.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, my favorite episode that I've ever done, as far as a producer goes, was with Jordan, and it was one of my first episodes as a co-host. And we did Private Investigator Stephen Rombaum, who was a Nazi hunter. I dug up a bunch of stuff on him, and we had a good conversation about when he used to go down to the border and basically sit out there with a shotgun and find people who were coming across the border to steal farm equipment. And he's like, "How did you find out about that?" I'm like, "I know people." And just the surprise in his voice and the depth that he went into in that conversation, I still think about that one to that day as my favorite, as far as just being on a show. Just the experience of being on a show and realizing that, hey, it really is kind of fun.
Yeah, that going back to the fun piece. What about photography? You studied photography.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite thing in the world to photograph?
Empty cities at 5 a.m. before they wake up. That is my favorite thing. I will go to a new city. I will get up before anybody's up, it's still dark, and then the crews come out to clean the streets, and you can just get some beautiful shots like that. You get the world waking up. That's what I really love. My favorite morning I think I've ever spent with my camera was in Hong Kong. I think back in 2007 at this point, or 2009, and I just walked around. It was a typhoon that was about to hit the city, and people were still getting ready for the day, but they were battening down the hatches, and it was just dark and gloomy, and it was great. I love that time of day to go out with my camera, especially in a city I've never been to before, because you just wander and you discover new things.
That's a good way to go about life. I guess wandering and discovering. I guess it kind of sounds like a zombie, but like I think that's an awesome way to approach it. There's definitely a very cool energy at that point in the day, especially in somewhere new. And then I know you used to work with a lot of companies in the movie industry, especially in your coding or web design days. What's something about the movie industry that took you by surprise?
That was one of the most amazing times of my life. I was the head programmer at Paramount Motion Pictures. I worked on Star Trek. I built a website for Titanic. I think what surprised me the most was how much attention to detail was given to every aspect of every frame of film and every piece of marketing and every pixel on a website. Everything was meticulously done. There was just not enough attention to detail for most people that are in that business because they wanted it to be perfect. That was one thing that I really took away from that.
In honor of you, I will take every single millisecond of this episode and edit it just to make sure it's good to go to get out the door. But no, Jason, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and tips and all your quirks that you listed. But where's the best place for people to connect with you and to follow your podcast?
Well, you talk about quirks and things about asking for reviews and stuff in the shows. I hate when people ask me where to find me because that should be in your show notes. You should say to your audience, all of Jason's links, where you can find him, will be in the show notes at my website /episode. I'm just going to tell you right now, fix that. You get a pro level tip there.
We could do that. Yeah, I have done that from time to time. It's there.
It's the best way to do it. You want to A/B test
I just hope
something?
people can spell your last name.
Well, no, it's at jpd.me. jpd.me. That's where you find me.
Perfect. And you can find the show notes for this episode at maxpodcasting.com/Jason-Defilippo. All right. And then last thing here, final thoughts. Stage is yours. Send us off here. It could be a quote, a line, whatever you want. Take us home here.
Oh, Jiminy Jeepers. Just try and make it to tomorrow. There you go. That's it. Try and make it to tomorrow.
Jiminy Jeepers, Jolly Jumpin' Jammer. That's the only reference that like that in podcasting history. Thank you, Jiminy Jason, for coming on the podcast, sharing your tips and stories. Just truly incredible. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow on your favorite podcast platform and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!